you'll see that it is all these moving pieces that become the plot of our health and well-being. Without changing these pieces, we'll be stuck in the same story of poor and unequal health outcomes. Yet, very often, solutions to these challenges tend to focus on the last mile of healthcare, on helping Ada when she's already sick, new apps to diagnose her disease, to help her in an emergency, to get her drugs, to connect her to a doctor. These solutions are lifesavers, don't get me wrong, but focusing on them in isolation is like rewriting the last paragraph of the story alone. It comes too late. In many cases, if Ada is not in the right income bracket or lives in the wrong neighborhood, she may not even be able to access them. What is really needed is to change the story itself. To do this, we have to move towards systemic innovations, integrated solutions that look at all the building blocks of the story of our health, in and beyond care. Essentially, we have to reverse engineer our story to understand its pieces. The bad road that made Ada have an accident, the pollution that worsened her asthma, the safety issues that affect her mental health, the healthcare services she could not afford. By leaning into this interconnected story of health, we can truly begin to rewrite it. As a child, I used to dream of making a difference in the health of the people around me. Today, I get to do science on the global stage. As I do so, I've realized that there are so many challenges we have known for years, and yet they persist. I find it quite frustrating. For example, as early as year 2000, scientific articles called attention to the rise of diabetes, heart diseases, and other non-communicable diseases in emerging economies. I often wonder how many people have died in the decades since these scientific articles were published. We have to do something different. We have to go beyond rewriting the last paragraph to rewriting the story itself. I have dedicated my work to this exact goal, to understand and design systemic innovations to the challenges that define the story of our health, and therefore to contribute to transforming Africa's economies into well-being economies. I think of this in 3 parts. Part 1 is the beginning, where we make sense of the story of our health. Every city has a signature, a persona made up of the building blocks that shape its health outcomes, from the history to social norms to demographics to health outcomes to infrastructure and so on. Through my work, I seek to understand this persona of different African cities and how they relate to the health of citizens. This helps us to know the trajectory a city is on, what challenges it is facing, and what challenges it can anticipate. Part 2 is the middle, where we invest in systemic innovations. With this information, we don't have to start from scratch. We can compare cities in similar points in the trajectory of development to understand what is currently needed. We can invest in adaptive innovations, solutions that have been shown to address existing problems. Beyond that, we can also anticipate what the city will need and invest in anticipatory innovations that can prevent problems in the future. Part 3 is the ending, where we make sense of our solutions in order to improve them. But we don't stop at designing portfolios of systemic innovation. By using tools to continually learn what is going on in all these interconnected systems, we can make sure that the solutions are suited for the people they are designed for, improve them, and where necessary, apply them on a bigger scale. That, in a nutshell, is the blueprint. But to write a great story, you cannot do it alone. You need editors, publishers, press, readers, etc. Likewise, we can only write a different story for health in Africa with all these pieces of the ecosystem. The innovators making solutions, policymakers incentivizing innovation on complex challenges, investors with the patient capital to shape our markets and infrastructure for health and well-being, and researchers that study the moving parts to help us know what works. So I hope that if you're thinking big about health in Africa, and about innovating at the level of the causes and not just the consequences, you'll reach out to me. Thank you.
Greetings from Mauritius. I'm Dr. Vidushini again, next Einstein Forum Fellow. What if I tell you that an oyster mushroom burger can reduce your risk of cancer? Many of you will feel a ray of hope while others will be quite skeptical of this idea. In fact, the molecules in the oyster mushroom are superweapons, and they have been shown to have blocking and suppressing effects on a number of cancers. This underlies the concept of cancer chemoprevention, where the basic idea is to arrest or reverse either the initial stages of cancer development or the progression to malignancy. I believe that this approach provides much optimism to us, especially when the World Health Organization claims that 2/5 of the newly diagnosed cancer cases each year are preventable. You would certainly agree that cancer is the second leading cause of death globally. 1 in 5 men and 1 in 6 women will develop cancer during their lifetime. With the healthcare system in low and middle income countries, the cancer challenge is ever more daunting. So, across sub-Saharan Africa, 80% of the newly diagnosed cancer cases are in advanced stage of the disease, and fewer than 10% will receive radiotherapy, chemotherapy, or even pain relief. Amidst this gloomy situation, the good news is that cancer is not a single event. It proceeds through discernible stages which occupy a major portion of the lifetime of an individual. The transition between the successive stages can be inhibited, and it is speculated that food chemicals have the ability to intervene efficiently and cut the lifeline of the cancer cells. The possibilities to interrupt the cancer development is quite substantial. From an initiated cell to a benign tumor, and from a benign tumor to a malignant tumor, there are numerous opportunities to stop or reverse the process. A recent work from our group on oyster mushroom has shown the latter's ability to reduce liver cancer. We found that 6 milligrams of oyster mushroom extract grown in Mauritius was able to reduce the lesions in the liver of the model organism. It also restored normal growth as well as reduced DNA damage and decreased inflammation. The normal cellular antioxidants were restored as well as it boosted the immune system of the organism. We attributed such an effect to the molecules present in the oyster mushroom. In fact, these molecules, they targeted multiple pathways simultaneously during the cancer development, unlike cancer drugs which will have 1 or 2 targets. This philosophy extends to the African indigenous food, which are endowed with dietary phytochemicals which have health benefits. Their ability to target multiple pathways make them ideal candidate in cancer chemoprevention. I believe that this is a very inexpensive as well as a readily applicable and readily accessible approach to reduce cancer death in Africa. Pinning our hopes on new technology is not the only way to reduce cancer death on the continent. When we realize that 60% of the anti-cancer drugs in clinical use have a direct or indirect link to plants, this raises our hope that African indigenous food fits well in the effort of chemoprevention. Scaling up such a prevention intervention backed up by scientific evidence of safety and efficacy will certainly reduce the number of deaths from cancer in Africa. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Suleiman, a Sudanese immunologist and an instructor of medicine at the Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School in Boston. Imagine that one of you has TB, and all of you are exposed. All of you are at risk, but 90% of you will never get clinical symptoms of TB. And of the 10% who will, they might get it right away, or it might be years before they develop any signs of active disease. One germ, multiple outcomes. We have tests like this tuberculin skin test. Basically, we test whether the germ has infected the body. Meanwhile, someone who's been infected by the germ could be walking around with TB for years, potentially exposing others, if they even come back at all to the clinic. So how do we make a decision to inform the clinical care that these people should receive? Should the healthcare giver give preventative treatment that has side effects to everyone who was exposed to the disease, knowing that 90% will never actually need it? That's just not an economic option in every country, and it's not a good option for everyone. Using gene expression profiling, my lab in Cape Town has been able to develop much more accurate predictions. We found that the activation of 4 genes was enough to predict the outcome, which we translated into a score. A clinical trial to test the concept that preventative antibiotics can block TB expression in those with high scores has actually been implemented in Cape Town, and the results will be published soon. And if you are able to translate the simple gene expression test into a handheld point-of-care device, which is possible in the next years, that means that doctors and patients in high endemic settings like South Africa or Namibia or other African countries could now know during the visit to the doctor if they should start preventative treatment right away. That's the predictive power of personalized medicine. But the tool that powers personalized medicine isn't biomedical devices like the ones we are working on. The tool that powers it is data science. And as wide a field as personalized medicine is, there are so many problems to solve that have more than one predictor and more than one outcome. Any place where we are good at naming the problem but cannot predict quickly enough which interventions will work, that's where data science is helpful. The work that I'm doing is a proof of concept that we can use these tools to solve these kinds of problems. Now what we need is African problem solvers.
Right. There we go. You caught me a bit off guard. I was trying to check what we are doing next. All right. So we have the final closing ceremony. Let's all jump in because we need to wrap up and make sure that we have proper energy. Dr. Sarah Suleiman, now I understand why we met each other immediately when we came for this session. Fantastic work.
Thank you.
Yes, well done. And I'm sure you'll keep pushing. I can see some people saying they're super proud of you. You mentor them. So I know those sentiments echo far. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. I think we could all just jump to the closing ceremony. You as well? Perfect.
Yes.
All right. Okay, here we go. Thank you. And you've been among the people who's helped ever since we started with the questions, moderating. So we really appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right. See you at the closing ceremony.
All right.